here with Dominic Felucci, or not to be confused with Felucci, that's the designer. We're here presenting another edition of New Millennium Oral History Archives in the World. Dominic is a native New Yorker, has been here all his life, been involved in the life of New York in many ways. Very committed Catholic and a sports fan. Two games, hockey and baseball. As a matter of fact, after this interview, he's headed straight to
Brooklyn Cyclones for a doubleheader.
Oh, you're doing a doubleheader today?
Yeah, the game got rained out yesterday, so they made a doubleheader
Two
today.
games. Wow,
Yeah, 6 o'clock start.
So you get 2 for 1.
Yeah.
Wow, excellent.
Not complaining.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful day today, Thursday, 27 May, 2021. So Dominic, tell us about growing up in New York. I mean, you grew up mostly down in the Lower East Side.
Born and raised, born in Little Italy. My parents came out of Baxter
Just a little louder,
Street.
please.
Okay. Born in Little Italy. My parents came out of Baxter Street. Moved to the Lower East Side, Knickerbocker Village, 1964. I've been living there ever since. Went to St. Joseph's School on Monroe Street. That's where I went to Brooklyn.
That was grammar school.
Grammar school.
Yeah, that would be grammar school, rather. Yeah. And
First communion, confirmation there. Graduated in '77. Went to LaSalle Academy, Catholic High School, 2nd Street, 2nd Avenue. Graduated there '81. After that, I didn't want to go to Catholic college. I went to Pace University. Got a degree in public accounting. Graduated in 1985.
so all those Catholic schools that you went to no longer exist, if I'm not mistaken. Is LaSalle Academy still there?
LaSalle, they sold the building to a British group. They have a British high school for expats. They're actually located now in a Ukrainian high school, a Ukrainian grade school,
Which is
on
all
East 6th Street,
Yeah.
East 6th and 2nd. LaSalle still exists, but in a different building. St. Joe's got closed down in 2015 when Cardinal Dolan decided to close the churches to Making All Things New project. The sad part was St. Joseph's was breaking even, but due to politics with the church that they merged them with Transfiguration, they got closed.
It's really appalling, the amount of Catholic churches and some schools that have closed in New York City.
Oh, I agree.
I'm sure it's happened elsewhere.
Yes.
Just absolutely appalling that they made those decisions to close them. Yes, there were other aspects that presented problems with other areas within the institution of the church.
That's true.
Specifically legal settlements that the church had to raise
Well,
money
they
for.
need the money. That's what's happening.
Well, they needed money to raise money for those settlements having to do with scandals.
I know.
Primarily, right? Would you say so?
I agree.
Yeah, but it's a shame.
Let me just add, there was
And
a
some of those churches were even.
Yeah, they were
financially
even.
sound, such as Our Lady of Peace on West East 62nd Street,
Yeah.
off 3rd Avenue.
Yeah, I heard about them. They're breaking even. There's no problem there. I know there was a church around the corner from LaSalle Academy, Church of Nativity, on 2nd Avenue between 2nd and East 3rd Street. It was like a modern building. That was one of the churches that was closed. Now they're developing the property. So basically, from where Church of Nativity was down to the corner where LaSalle had their annex, a developer's going to come and tear down those buildings and build something else.
We're doing this interview out fresco. We like doing it this way, but you just have to be a little louder because there's a lot of fun activities.
No problem.
And young people
I don't want to start
frolicking.
screaming too loud. They'll tell me to shut up, you know?
Yeah, just stand over there because
No
maybe we can get a bit of this great paint photograph of this great Italian paint photograph here by this American photographer. It's titled "The Girl in Little Italy." I almost said Little Italy.
And as you can tell, they're all checking around.
Yes, they shot that picture. She shot that picture in 1951. So tell us. So you went through this Catholic youth of yours. You experienced the church.
Grade school, so it was an altar boy.
Yeah.
Went to school, was taught by the nuns. The priest, I had lay teachers and nuns. Those were the ones that did the teaching. In high school, I had nuns, brothers, and lay teachers.
And then you went to Pace College,
I went to
which
Pace
is also
University.
downtown. So you kept everything really deep downtown in Manhattan. You just went.
Family situation, I keep an eye on my mother. My father left the house, so I didn't want to travel too far.
Did you have brothers and sisters as well?
Only child.
Oh, you're an only child.
Only child.
It's often rare when you see that.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra was an only child, which is astonishing.
Yeah,
Given the time,
From what I understand with the history with my parents, my mother had complications afterwards, so they didn't try again.
Right.
I mean, I had pets, dogs, cats, I had a lot of friends.
No, it's just sort of it's quite intriguing, and even when you hear a lot of different families and
That's true.
and most of them have lots of children, and it's interesting when it's just one child.
Well, my father's first generation and my mother's second generation. My mother's parents were both born here in Stateside.
And of course, you're born here.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you've seen a lot of changes in New York.
Oh, definitely.
We're just trying to backtrack here. So let's talk about when you went to Pace. Did you enjoy being at Pace College? Pace University.
Yeah. It's a good school, good accounting school.
Right.
Fortunately, my grades were good, so I had a full scholarship, so I didn't have to pay. Good teachers. Basically, I had to take the various accounting courses, auditing courses. So it was a good, well-rounded education as far as that goes.
Pace University is cheap by jowl to Wall Street. Did you wind up working there after you graduated from Pace?
No, I wound up working for city government. Was working actually part-time, working for the New York Post. If you remember back in the 80s, they used to have the morning paper and the afternoon paper.
An afternoon paper.
I used to work around downtown, around Fulton Street and National Street, Maiden Lane, around that area, helping to drive and deliver the papers.
Well, the printing press was down there for the Post.
At the time, it was on South Street.
Yeah. And Mrs. Schiff, Mrs. Dorothy Schiff, owned the paper at that point in
Schiff was gone.
81.
Schiff
Had
was
it been
gone
sold
at that
then?
point. Yeah,
Okay, it was sold
it was starting to become more conservative. I think Calico was gone.
Oh, okay.
Either Calico?
Yeah, because it was a big liberal paper.
Yeah.
New York Post was. I mean, it's hard.
They
to
were
imagine.
liberal for years. Then in the
For
80s, they
decades.
went conservative. Yeah.
Yeah, for eons.
And
they
then
were
the
big
Daily
liberal
News
paper.
was conservative when liberal.
That's right. It's a very interesting.
So they flip-flopped.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I worked, teenager, I worked for the Daily News. And I was a messenger of the Daily News when I was a kid. And I think I may have been at the Times for a little bit, but I remember the Daily News.
You know, the Daily News no longer has a newsroom.
Yeah. And not only that, they're part of a group of papers that have been sold
They're back
this
with
week.
they're back with the Tribune.
Yeah.
If you remember, Chicago Tribune
The
owned
hedge
them for
fund.
years.
I bought a whole set of them.
Now they're back with the Tribune.
Slew of papers.
And the New York Post is now printing out the New York Times going out in Whitestone. Everything's changing.
Yeah. And of course, the readership is down at almost any sort of old media.
I mean, I buy the paper on Sundays mainly for the Posters. I'll be honest with you. If the unions got to agree to this, they should only print 3 days a week. Print Wednesday for whatever sales, Friday for the weekend, and then Sunday.
I don't know. I'd go against that.
Sometimes they're doing that.
I'm a diehard. I love the old papers.
I
still
got
read
you. Yeah.
a huge amount of papers. It takes me a while to get to all of them these days because so many of them are folded
Right.
like an accordion. But I even get the overseas ones. The Telegraph, the London, the Times of London, the Independent, the Guardian.
I read a lot of
the
this
Evening
stuff
Standard,
online.
but I'm forced to have someone pull them up and I get them online. So I do the online
I
subscription.
do the online.
I'm not wired
like this,
myself, but I-
link stories like that. So.
Yeah. But that was so you wound up working. How long were you with the city and the newspaper?
I was with the newspaper about 4 years. It was a part-time job. It worked out perfectly because my class ended about 2:30. The first afternoon
So you were working
edition.
while you were in college.
Yeah. First afternoon edition came out, and then the second afternoon edition came out a little bit after.
What were you doing? Were you delivering?
I was helping out deliver. The truck would come in, get the hand truck, load the papers up, go down to the subway. I used to deliver to the big newsstand on the AC line at Fulton Street. Have to go down the ramps, the steps.
That was real convenient for you because the school, Pace College is right down there, right near
and
Fulton
I
Street.
also got exercise.
Right.
Because I'm lifting the bundles, your moms are like this.
And then the Post had a delivery, a big delivery spot.
They were on South Street.
The printing
That's
spot,
where
yeah.
the printing
So you
spot
could also
was, the
walk
truck.
there.
Yes.
Right. So how many years were you doing that?
About 3-4 years. Then the senior year.
So that all through college.
Yeah, most of it. And then after it's like, okay, I got to get a job in accounting, bookkeeping, auditing, what have you. So they used to have the guidance office where they have job listings. New York City Department of Sanitation had a job for college age. Certain number of dollars per hour, you work 20 hours a week. So I took that job. I actually was making less with that than I was with the Post. But I had to get something in the field. Eventually, they offered me full-time employment when I graduated. That was in June 1985. They wanted me to stay for 2 years. The way it works in the city of New York is you have to take a civil service exam to maintain your job. At the time I was working in sanitation, there was no such exam offered. So I was able to stay provisionally. 2 years later, a co-worker and a friend Went to another agency, Housing Preservation Development. He offered me a position there. He said, we got an opening. So I went over there as an auditor. For the first 2 years, I was a bookkeeper. And then for the remainder of my career, say for 5 years working at the accountant's District Council 37, I was an auditor. Either an auditor in charge, or a manager.
When you started working for the city, the mayor, who was the mayor?
Koch.
Oh, it was Koch.
I was there for Koch, Dinkins, Giuliani, Bloomberg, and Plaza.
Oh my goodness. So, and then did you take an early retirement?
Yeah. I left the end of 2018, turned 55, was thinking of leaving. New boss came in, came from upstate, around my age actually, almost older than me. And she came in to change the computer mainframe. Okay, archaic mainframe we need to move. That's what we do most of all that.
Yeah, just
She pretty much did everything.
a little louder.
Okay. All right. She used to do mainframe.
Right.
Okay. We got to change our mainframe over at the New York Retirement System. New directors brought in. She came from upstate, worked for the state retirement system. Was involved in the mainframe replacement project. For the year that she was there, that I was there, she basically did everything except replace the mainframe. She later admitted that. But it was getting to the point where thinking of leaving. Looked at the amount that it could get early retirement. Money's pretty good. In New York State, you don't have to pay state and local tax on a government pension. So the only thing I'll be paying is federal. So even though I'll be making less money, I'll be taking more home. So I said, you know what, let me make the jump. So December 18, I packed it up. 34 years.
December 18, 2018.
December 23rd, 2018.
2018.
Because the way the city pays you, even though you work 10 days, you're paying on a 14-day cycle. So I had to put from Sunday through Saturday. So technically I was still working on the Saturday. December 23rd, 2018 was a Sunday. Started a new pay cycle. So I got my last pay stub. I was out. A couple months later, my benefit got finalized. Took max. Girlfriend didn't want anything, so.
It was very interesting because I'm just thinking, again, the arc of your life has largely been around downtown Brooklyn. I mean, when you were working for the municipality of New York, the city of New York,
Right.
you were working.
I was working
in the City Hall area.
City Hall area, and then over at nights I was working downtown Brooklyn. They're in the Marriott building, so easy train ride. Yeah, downtown Brooklyn's pretty lively. They got their park by Borough Hall, similar to Cruise Park.
We sort of evolved it over the chronology here because we went right up to the point of retirement. So
okay.
we'll save the post-retirement, which is just 3 years to near the end. So how did you see downtown changing? For the time you were growing up to what it is now.
When I was growing up, there was a lot more blue collar jobs. You had the New York Post, you had the Fully Fish Market. The downtown area south of the Brooklyn Bridge was pretty much anything related to the piers, the shipping. Even my neighborhood on Market Street.
You saw Steve Doors, dock workers.
There were some dock workers, late 60s, early 70s. Then when they got rid of the piers, a lot of those businesses went out. They were allowed to stay in the buildings. They started tearing it down, making parks. Murray Bertram Field, which was right at the foot of the Manhattan Bridge. Those used to be streets there. There used to be older buildings, warehouses, factories, things like that. All that is gone.
All of that is gone.
Same thing downtown, south of the Brooklyn Bridge. If you remember the movie The French Connection, you saw the kids playing street hockey with a can.
All that remains is the housing project.
Yeah, the housing project's still there.
From the film that Gene Hackman.
Yeah, that's still there.
French Connection.
Yeah, that's Al Smith House. They built that in the 50s.
Yeah, that's all that remains.
Yeah, that's still there. But a lot of those buildings where the kids were playing hockey, those are more residential buildings.
Now, there was also an overhead train. That film was made 50 years ago, half a century ago. The French Connection.
Okay.
Now, there's a scene where he's running for the project, the assassin, his French assassin.
That's still there. That's over in Brooklyn. That's like their beach Bensonhurst.
Oh, so
that's the D train.
I see. So the scene just, of course, when they filmed these movies.
If you watch it carefully, it passes by Lafayette High School 3 times. They went back and
that's a little trivia.
He went from 25th Avenue to about 62nd Street.
In no time.
Yeah, and they went back and forth. Yeah. Ironically, my dad lives not too far from me. So I'm a little familiar with the area, and I got a good friend of mine that lives a block down on Bay Park.
That film is like so many films, Midnight Cowboy, others. It's a real snapshot of New York.
Oh, definitely.
In the time period. In the case of French Connection with Gene Hackman, and I forget the other actor who was in that. That was made in 61, 50 years ago.
Well, I'll give you a prime example of change. When they used to work for Housing Preservation Development, the city used to auction off distressed properties. Some were vacant lots, some were buildings that needed a lot of work. And this was back in the 80s. So if you hung in there, anybody bought that property, you'd have to spend a fortune. They stopped doing those auctions sometime in the 90s when Giuliani came in. That's when the real estate market was booming. So definitely a lot of change as far as a lot of building, a lot of money coming in. I'll give you an example. Back in the day, you used to go to flea markets, check out a record or a baseball card. There was a big one on Broadway in Grand Street. Big outdoor lot, parking lot, where you got it's a building now.
Yeah, unbelievable. And you must have seen the changes, and you saw the changes happening in Soho, what they later called Soho, what they later called Tribeca. Tribeca stands
for...
They
went from meat packing to, like Tribeca and all that stuff.
Right.
And then you got, Tribeca's right on board now, but the west side, that all changed.
You saw all the surrounding areas go from really working class folk to sort of posture.
My father used to take me to a working horse stable on Charles and Washington Street. He took pictures of me. He used to watch the horses. They had a yard. They used to run. That's buildings now.
Washington Street, if I'm not mistaken, ran about, 20 blocks?
It ran along West Street. Now it's broken up.
Yeah.
Well, if you know the High Line used to be the freight railroad that originally ran down 11th Avenue. Then they put it on the elevator, and that ran straight down. Actually ran through buildings.
They ran for about 20.
It went south to 14.
18 blocks, 20 blocks or so. What is now the High Line.
And now that's a desert because there's really no transit. I mean, they built a new station at 34th and 11th. Too bad they couldn't connect it and ramp up to the High Line, because then they could ran that train down to 14.
Right. Well, the High Line, they repurposed it.
Yeah, they made a park.
Turned it into sort of sort of a green space. Yeah. Overhead green space that runs the length of what, if I'm not mistaken, they've completed renovation right of that.
They did, yeah.
Disused rail. So it runs about 20 blocks or so?
Pretty much. It runs like 30th to 34th Street down to 14.
I think does it go up to 34th Street?
Yes.
And it goes down to 14. 14. So it's about 20 blocks.
It might be 30th Street. It might be where Hudson Yards is.
Yeah, I think it's about 31st Street. So it's just fewer than 20 blocks or so. Wow, so you remember all of that, of course. Now, do you have any friends there that you remember that are still there? Or the neighborhood change? Even Little Italy's not with Little Italy.
No, Little Italy got a lot smaller. What happened with Little Italy was the old Italian businesses never bought the buildings. When the Chinese came in, they jacked up the rent they left. So now where Little Italy is predominantly more Chinese, less Italian.
But even Chinatown is being eaten away.
Now it's being eaten away because everything's going up. Now you got Chinatowns in Brooklyn along 8th Avenue. A lot of Chinese along 86th Street. Any of the trains that run out of Chinatown, like around Canal Street, like the N train, the B train, the D train, as long as you can get from Chinatown Manhattan to Chinatown Brooklyn, that's where they go.
Well, so you have the big Chinatown in Queens.
Yes.
Right? Astoria.
Right along the, yeah. Actually,
no, it's Astoria, Flushing.
Yeah, the 7 train.
That's a much bigger area, right?
Yes.
And it's the same thing with Little Italy. Now it's the Little Italy section of Belmont Avenue in the Bronx.
It's very small. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of the people that work the restaurants are Albanian. In Belmont.
In the Bronx?
Yes.
They're Albanian?
Yeah. Because back in the 70s, a lot of the Albanians were able to leave their country. They all went to Naples. They went to Napoli. So, learn the language, learn how to cook. Eventually they migrated here.
And you know the old joke, funny joke, about the most famous Albanians.
Okay.
John Belushi.
Yes.
And Mother Teresa.
Oh yes.
Oh yes.
Very true.
Yeah. And you've been part of the Roman Catholic Church your whole life.
Baptized Roman Catholic state. Go to church every Sunday.
Yeah, you were very involved.
Like I said, I was an altar boy at St. Joe's. I was lecturing for a while at St. Joe's.
Can you tell us about some of the churches that have folded, like in Portland? They were forced to close, really.
Well, St. Joseph's,
Lower Manhattan.
Okay. St. Joseph's, of course, on Monroe Street. St. James on James Street. that used to be predominantly Irish parish, but the church needed a lot of work. Last Mass I went there, including the pre-16 people, not going to be viable. And there was a mystery fire that occurred in the church because the church is landlocked, they can't tear it down. Another church that recently closed downtown, the St. Andrew's Baptismal Building. Initially they had Saturday Vigil Mass and Sunday Mass. Nobody was going, so they eventually closed it on the weekends, only kept it open during the week for the government workers. But what happened was after COVID, nobody's working, everybody's working from home, they closed it.
I've attended Mass at a number of the churches down in Lower Manhattan, in St. Peter's, the oldest Catholic church in Manhattan.
I've been there a few times.
Right in the shadow of the World Trade Center. And then the church right there, just a few blocks from the stock exchange.
Oh, Our Lady of Victory.
That's right, Our Lady of Victory. Very nice, small Catholic church. And then there was, and then I didn't realize that there were even more in the sort of in the residential area, going east of, let's say, the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yes.
Yeah. What are some of those?
Well, St. Teresa's is still there. My grandparents actually got married there in the 30s. Then my grandmother came out of Cherry Street. Again, connection to the old neighborhood.
Right.
St. Mary's on Grand Street still open.
What is fascinating about that, and you and I have discussed this off camera, is the ethnic groups that are now that people or have made up the parishioners of these churches, whereas those churches were largely Italian American and which other ethnic group would you say?
Italian American, and then you also had the Chinese.
And the Chinese.
They were big back in the 50s.
Now you have Vietnamese.
Vietnamese, you have some Filipino, Hispanic, of course. St. Teresa's predominantly Hispanic parish. St. Mary's also. Transfiguration was Irish, became Italian. My great-grandmother used to put a priest there back in the 40s and 50s. That became predominantly Chinese.
Well, the group that was always down there, or at least for a good while, at least since the 50s, late 50s or so, 60s, were the Hispanic.
Right.
They were down. Where the Hispanic population were down there. And of course the Italian population was down there, and Irish and others. And have those churches lost? I know they've seen a decline in membership. And is the membership, the parishioners are now principally elderly?
Well, Transfiguration, pretty much I think would be viable. Again, predominantly Chinese parish, there's still Chinese in the area, young people as well as old. They have a pretty good crowd, pretty good mix. St. Teresa's, I've been through once since post-COVID, mostly an older population. They still impose a lot of the restrictions. They won't go around with a collection plate, mask mandates, things of that nature. They try to renovate the pews, and they're still unrenovated.
Right.
My feeling is they haven't made fully progress.
One of the things we're leaving out, I'm sure we're leaving out a few other parishes, but it's now a basilica. So
The old St. Patrick's.
so designated by
I've
former,
never attended a mass there. They have a cemetery along the side on Prince Street. I should try to get there one day, but now that
It's a lovely building and a burial ground right there.
Right on Prince Street.
And they have a young group of parishioners.
I heard they did like a social on the late Sunday evening.
I've been there for that. Very good, a small little gathering. Well, I should say one bottle of wine. Split by whoever gets there can get to the table first. Yeah. But it's a wonderful parish, wonderful mission, and which is, of course, designated as a basilica by His Holiness Pope Benedict XVI, who's still with us a number of years ago. So it's interesting that old St. Patrick's Church, which was the first St. Patrick's, was able to get that
And they actually
designation.
merged them with the church I was baptized in, most Christians blood. They have, I think, the Vietnamese and Filipino mass, and then they have the English.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I've been inside that parish. Very nice. And just so much wonder about the history of those and who was there. And it's so I hope they have archivists who are doing the work and doing the history of the changing population and much else, and people who will spirituality of these parishes and these churches were, offered wonderful spiritual offerings.
A lot of great churches, great architecture,
The architecture, of course.
It's a go.
The architecture, the statues.
St. Joseph's, where I used to go, to have nice statues, had a nice mosaic with Jesus over the altar.
Right.
Nice old school altar, very similar to Holy Innocents.
Right. It's very similar to Holy Innocents in the only Roman Catholic church in the Garment District that survives. Yeah. Not that there were others. Were there a couple others?
A couple others.
Yeah, just maybe one or two.
I know there was one that used to do the midnight masses for the people that work the theater district.
But that's not the Garment.
That's for a little further up. Yeah,
it's Broadway.
Up,
Yeah, in the theater district.
Yeah.
They still do. St. Malachi.
The only other one you have
That's on West 49th Street.
You got St. Francis over on 31st Street, right down the block from the bar.
Right.
That's the only one I can think of.
Right. It's still technically Fashion Avenue goes down to 26th and 7th. So I guess you can include St. John the Baptist at West 30th.
Right.
The entrance used to be on West 31st, and then St. Francis with two entrances, West 32nd and West 31st.
Well, if you recall, in 2015 they wanted to merge Holy Innocents with St. Francis.
Well, that was
that's a whole other ball.
Yeah.
You could do a whole documentary just on that,
which
has already been done on YouTube, so no problem.
You have the traditional St. Holy Innocents, of course, and then way wilder.
It would not have worked.
Radical. I would say radical, but more liberal. Yes.
You have a better shot for mixing oil and water. Okay, so
that was it.
Yeah, one of them.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, that's very big cover.
Tell us about your retirement as we come to a close. You're a young retiree.
55.
You retired at 55. You're still quite young. What have you been doing with your time?
Well, basically, I like hockey and I like baseball, so I've been doing a lot of traveling.
So hockey and baseball, of course.
Pretty much.
We talked earlier.
Did a few trips. 2019, flew up to Toronto for the minor league playoffs. Unfortunately, Canada's closed now, so who knows when they're going to reopen. 2019, my dad wound up getting a TIA, which is basically the stroke without the blood clot. So he was in rehab for a while.
You're taking care of your family.
I was taking care of my dad. My mother passed when I was 15. She had the funeral mass at St. Joseph's, which was the last funeral mass I went to, because that was in May, and in July they were closed.
Wow.
Because of the making more things. 2020, of course, was COVID, so that kind of shut everything down. Again, had to stay with my dad for a couple of months because he had COVID pneumonia, and 3 weekends in a row he was in the hospital. I said, forget it, Dad, I'm coming home. Stayed with him for a couple of months. Then he got tired of my company. He's like, okay, go home. You don't have to come back. I mean, he's 86, very independent person.
Wonderful. So I'm sure that you're happy, like everybody else, with things opening up more after this lockdown. And you got your sport teams. You're headed to a double header this evening in Brooklyn.
Yes.
What team is that again?
Brooklyn Cyclones.
Brooklyn Cyclones.
They used to be short season. Major League Baseball decided to revamp the minor leagues. Brooklyn is now considered high A, which is 2 levels up from below A, which no longer exists. A couple of players that played for the Cyclones a couple of years back are with the team. Different players. Right now they're playing 6-game homestands against the same team to limit travel. Maybe next year they'll change that. But at this point you see the same team over and over. Unfortunately during the week they don't get big crowds. Maybe 500 or less. But it's something to do.
It is.
You're out of the house.
And
you're doing something.
And you got your sports.
I got my
Mike,
sports. I got friends.
Pardon me. I was thinking of somebody. So Dominic, tell us as we exit from this interview. Thanks for coming down and giving us a New Yorker's narrative.
Thanks for having me, JB.
Yes. Tell us what you hope for the city as we come out of this appalling, situation that we've been in.
Hopefully things will start to open up.
What would you like to see?
Things calm
in
down
an improved
in general.
city.
Things calm down in general.
Meaning the crime, which is galloping out of control.
I mean, my beef with the police in general is basically I see them more shakedown laws, especially if you're a driver. They're always looking to hit you with parking tickets, red light camera, cell phone, this, that.
So you think that
if they let the police concentrate on crime,
rather
not
than
assume
ticketing
not assume everybody of color is a debt collector, and quit with the ticketing to raise revenue, which is why I think they're pushing for gambling. That's why I think they're pushing marijuana. I think they need other sources of tax.
Well, I think that gambling is a sad development.
It's true, but you know what? The governments make money on it with a lot of it.
Yeah, clearly, yeah. I mean, it's just.
I'll give you one fair story with the ticket. My father got out of the hospital, was moved to rehab. I'm coming to see him. calls me up. I'm driving. I got to pick up the phone. Like, just move. Get pulled over by a police officer off the Bell Parkway, Bay Parkway exit. So I told the officer, I said, my dad's over at the home on Cropsey Avenue. He knew where it was. Gives me a ticket. He goes, oh, fight it in court. I'm fighting. This is July 2019. I get the letter. July 2020 is the hearing. See how important this stuff is? Don't worry about money. A year. Okay? COVID hits. Okay, how am I going to get the records? My dad's in the rehab hospital. Well, nothing's open. End of April, I get a letter. It was a godsend. Your ticket was dismissed.
Excellent.
Fine.
Excellent. There you go. Happy
I
development.
even told the officer, I says, look, my dad just got moved out of the hospital to rehab. He's calling me. What do you want me to do? I picked up the phone fast, I hung up. Have some common sense. No, they're looking for money.
Another day in the naked city.
Oh, yeah,
in Gotham,
definitely.
New York, as it were. Well, Dominic, thanks for coming down. Enjoy your doubleheader today.
Actually,
And it's wonderful having you as a New Yorker. And of course, we go to some of the same parishes.
That's
so
right.
I'll
definitely see you at church somewhere along the way.
Good seeing you,
Thanks,
Dominic.
JP. All right, take care.
This has been another edition of New Millennium Oral History Archives in the World. And we've had the wonderful Dominic Felucci. I always want to say Felucci, the designer.
Close enough.
Dominic Felucci.
As long as you don't call me late for dinner or deadbeat.
So we thank you for coming down today, and enjoy the doubleheader.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.